Hey, Soul Stories fam. We've got a swoon-worthy love story for you today. Let's jump in and tell us, what city are you watching from? Music from the live orchestra filled the Grand Regent Hotel ballroom. Crystal chandeliers blazed overhead, their lights spilling across the marble floor, casting an aura of opulence throughout the entire room. Elegant gowns swept the floor, perfectly tailored tuxedos moved with confident strides, mingling with laughter, toasts, and the soft clinking of crystal glasses. For most guests, the annual charity gala was an opportunity to showcase their status, display their power, and forge new connections. But for Amelia Reed, it was nothing more than an assignment from her newsroom. She was here to observe, to listen, and perhaps to collect more pieces for the investigative series she was quietly pursuing. Amelia wore a simple dark blue dress, her hair neatly tied back, with almost no jewelry. Compared to the ladies draped in heavy diamonds, she was a shadow, barely noticeable. And that was exactly how she liked it. She preferred to stay hidden, to linger at the edges, letting others forget she was there. When a waiter handed her a glass of red wine, Amelia quietly took a seat at an empty table in the corner. From here, she had a clear view of the room without drawing attention. Her fingers flipped open a small notebook tucked inside her purse, where she jotted down quick notes. Heston Corporation present, handshake with the mayor, a hidden deal, or Mrs. Wilkins whispering to Bank Director Klein. Strange. She scribbled, looked up, then scribbled again. The feeling of isolation had become almost comforting. Suddenly, whispers rippled through the crowd like a gust of wind. The grand doors opened, and every gaze turned toward them. Dominic Cross walked in. Amelia had seen him in the papers, in clipped photographs from financial magazines. The infamous billionaire, nicknamed the Wolf of Wall Street, the man who never loses. But in person, he radiated something harder to define. A silent authority that needed no display. He wore a perfectly fitted black tuxedo, his steps purposeful, his half-smile suggesting he always knew eyes were on him. People nodded respectfully, women adjusted their gowns, their eyes glittering with hope of being noticed. Amelia frowned slightly. In her notes, the name Dominic Cross had appeared dozens of times. Shady investments, vanishing money trails, offshore subsidiaries. He was the biggest target of the series she was working on. She bent down quickly writing, Cross present, corporation behind most anonymous funds. When she looked up, her breath caught. Dominic's cold gray eyes were fixed directly on her. For a few seconds, she couldn't look away. It felt like he could see straight through her, as if he already knew exactly what she was thinking. She turned quickly, inhaling deeply, forcing herself to stay calm. Number. She couldn't let him notice her. But minutes later, a tall shadow stopped in front of her table. Amelia lifted her eyes, and Dominic Cross was standing there. Sitting alone? His voice was low, not loud, yet it sent a shiver of tension through her whole body. Amelia blinked, scrambling for a casual reply, but before she could, Dominic extended his hand, polite and assured. Care for a dance? The room seemed to pause. A few glances followed them, some jealous, others curious. Amelia froze. She knew if she refused, it would only draw more attention. A reporter turned down by a billionaire? Tomorrow's joke. But if she accepted, she would be stepping into a game she wasn't sure she wanted. Her heart pounded as she placed her hand in his. All right, she answered softly but firmly. Dominic smiled faintly, tightening his grip just enough before leading her to the dance floor. The music shifted into a romantic waltz. He placed a hand on her back, drawing her into the rhythm as naturally as if they had danced together many times before. Amelia tensed, but Dominic guided her skillfully, each step smooth and certain. The closeness between them was enough for her to hear his breath, the faint scent of sandalwood rising from his suit unsettling her further. I don't usually see reporters in places like this, Dominic remarked. Amelia forced a calm tone. I'm here for work, and I'm here for pleasure. He tilted his head, smiling lightly. Perhaps we've started off on the wrong foot. Amelia looked him straight in the eye. Maybe, but you're not the kind of man I can easily turn into a light-hearted story. Dominic leaned closer, his eyes glinting with equal parts mischief and danger. Then I suppose I'll just have to try and surprise you. The music kept playing, soft yet insistent, like the beat of Amelia's own heart. She spun in a full circle within Dominic's arms, and only when his eyes lowered to meet hers did she realize she was truly at the center of the game. This wasn't just a dance. It was the first step into the most dangerous connection of her life. Amelia knew Dominic Cross was no stranger. For the past 6 months, her investigation files had revolved around Cross Holdings, money shuffling between subsidiaries, anonymous projects, rumors of shady deals. Everything led back to one man, Dominic. He wasn't just wealthy. He was a symbol of power and secrecy. No one really knew what went on behind those closed doors. And now here he was, standing inches away, his hand resting on her back, guiding her to the rhythm. You're my biggest target, Amelia thought, a chill running down her spine. But Dominic was different. He tilted his head, gray eyes glinting beneath the chandelier light, lips curving into a faint, unreadable smile. He wasn't hurried, nor was he hiding. He seemed to know exactly who she was and why she was here, and instead of avoiding her, he had chosen to step closer. You dance well, Dominic's deep voice sounded, casual, almost like an offhand remark. Not really, Amelia replied, eyes never leaving his face. I can't compare to the women you usually dance with. He chuckled softly, a laugh that tugged at the corner of his lips, filled with challenge. Perhaps. But they don't look me straight in the eye the way you do. Amelia froze for a beat. He was right. While others lowered their gaze, offered flattering smiles, or avoided his stare, she had met it directly, like she was trying to pierce through the polished mask. Maybe I'm just curious, she said lightly, though her tone was edged. Dominic twirled her once more, leaning in to whisper, and sometimes curiosity is more dangerous than hate. Amelia swallowed hard, forcing composure. Deep down, she knew he was testing her. He was confident enough to turn this into a mental game, one where she could be either an opponent or prey. Aren't you afraid? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Letting a journalist like me get this close? Dominic arched a brow, still wearing that calm, easy smile. What do you think I have to be afraid of? His answer rattled her. His confidence was overwhelming, absolute, as if every crack had been sealed long ago. He knew she was a reporter, yet he let her dance in his arms, under the watch of hundreds of eyes. A silent declaration, I have nothing to fear from scrutiny. Amelia drew a deep breath, summoning her courage. People say the more heavily guarded a place is, the more secrets it hides. I don't believe an empire like yours has no fractures. Dominic paused for half a beat, his eyes flashing. Then he smiled again, resuming the dance. Maybe you'll find them. Maybe you won't. But if you truly search, be ready to believe what you find, because the truth isn't always what you hope for. There was something strange in his words, not quite a threat, not exactly a challenge. It was more like a warning. Don't be too certain too soon. As the music faded, Dominic still held her hand a moment longer. The grip wasn't urgent, but enough to send a shiver down her spine. He bent down, brushing his lips lightly across the back of her hand. A classic gesture, visible to the entire ballroom. Thank you for the dance, Miss Reed, he said, his voice low yet clear. We'll meet again. Amelia startled. Dominic turned and walked into the crowd, leaving her standing still. Questions stormed her mind. Had he known who she was from the very beginning? If so, why approach her? And why so much confidence when he should be avoiding an investigative journalist at all costs? Her fingers tightened around the small notebook. Her heart raced, not only from tension, but also from an unsettling, undeniable pull. Amelia left the ballroom later than she'd planned. Outside, the city night was cold, the streetlights stretching like an endless ribbon of light. She leaned against the railing, exhaling a thin stream of breath, Dominic's words echoing in her mind. Maybe you'll find them. Maybe you won't. She made a silent vow. I will. I have to. But deep inside, another voice whispered, what if the truth isn't what you think it is? Amelia shook her head, dismissing the thought, and walked away quickly. In a dark corner of the street, a sleek black car idled. Inside, Dominic sat in silence, slowly swirling the wine in his glass. Through the tinted window, he watched her figure retreat into the distance. A faint smile touched his lips. "You're fascinating, Amelia Reed," he murmured. "Let's see how far you'll go." The car pulled away, vanishing into the night, leaving behind only an empty square filled with the sound of the wind. 3 days after the gala, Amelia sat in her small apartment, her table buried under stacks of papers. The light from a single desk lamp spilled across pages of notes, crossouts, and tangled arrows connecting company names, investment funds, and consulting contracts. She had been working tirelessly since she got back, as if that fateful dance had lit a fire in her to uncover the truth faster. Yet the deeper she dug, the more fragmented everything became. Huge sums of money flowed through subsidiaries, vanishing only to reappear elsewhere. Projects worth tens of millions had no concrete reports. Signs of irregularities were evident everywhere, but they never rose to the level of suspicion. Nothing was solid enough to become evidence. Amelia raked her fingers through her hair and drew in a sharp breath. She hated this half-finished feeling. Journalism didn't allow her to publish an exposé on a handful of vague fragments, and yet her heart whispered, "Keep going." Sooner or later, the final piece will show itself. That afternoon, following a tip from a colleague, Amelia visited a children's shelter in the suburbs. Rumor had it that an anonymous benefactor sent steady donations every month. No one knew the name, but the money was enough to feed and educate dozens of kids. She stepped into the yard where children's laughter rang clear. They were playing soccer, shoes caked in dirt. In the middle of them was a tall man in a simple shirt, sleeves rolled up past his elbows. Dominic. Amelia froze behind the wooden gate. He was nothing like the cold figure in a tuxedo at the gala. Here, Dominic knelt to tie a boy's shoelaces, then laughed aloud as the kids attacked him for the ball. When one child fell, he quickly lifted him up, brushed the dirt off his shirt, and ruffled his messy hair. The smile on his face wasn't the practice one she'd seen on magazine covers. It was real, so bright it made Amelia's chest tighten unexpectedly. She stepped back, leaning against the wall, raising her camera. But just as her finger hovered over the shutter, her hand trembled and lowered. If she took the photo, people would assume he was acting. Yet she knew. No play could ever make children look at someone with eyes that innocent. The shelter's director passed by and spotted Amelia. "Looking for someone?" Amelia quickly tucked her notebook away and smiled. "Just visiting. I heard there's a benefactor who helps this place regularly." The woman nodded, eyes brimming with gratitude. "Yes, every month. Doesn't want to be named, but leaves a signature. DC. Sometimes he even comes by, fixes the fence, and teaches the kids their math. A rare good man." Amelia stood still. DC. Could it really be just a coincidence? On her way back, Amelia couldn't shake the image of the shelter. Two pictures tangled in her mind, spreadsheets riddled with suspicious figures, shady money transfers, and Dominic laughing, kneeling among orphans. Who is he really, she wondered? A criminal hidden behind clever masks, or a human being unfairly smeared by rumors? The question kept her awake all night. The next morning, Amelia stopped at a small cafe near the newsroom. It was modest, just a few old wooden tables and the faint scent of roasted beans. She chose her usual corner, opened her notebook, and tried to reorganize her thoughts. She was so deep in her notes that she didn't notice someone until a voice broke through. "Mind if I sit here?" Amelia looked up. Dominic. She froze. He wasn't in a sharp suit today, just a plain white shirt, collar unbuttoned, hair slightly mussed as if he'd just left a tense meeting. "Are you following me?" Amelia asked, her voice wary. Dominic sat down casually, setting a cup of black coffee on the table. "No, I just happened to see you. This city isn't as big as you think." Amelia tightened her grip on her pen. "I don't think we should be meeting like this." He leaned back, eyes steady but calm. "I know you're a journalist. I know you're investigating me, but I don't avoid it. Ask what you want." Amelia blinked. He admitted it all, without the slightest hint of fear. "You're not worried," she asked, "that I might write down anything I find?" Dominic shrugged, sipping his coffee. "People always write, but no one actually sees me. You do. That's the difference." Amelia's heart skipped. The words were too raw, too close. She leaned forward, her voice low and sharp. "What kind of man are you, Dominic?" He gave a faint smile, his eyes carrying a trace of sorrow. "Some call me a devil, others a savior. Both are true, or maybe neither is. But if you want to know, find out for yourself. And don't believe everything you hear." Amelia said nothing. In that moment, she saw both a dangerous man and one aching to be understood. Dominic rose, leaving a few bills under his cup. Before leaving, he bent down and murmured, "Amelia, you're stepping into the dark. But if you're not afraid, keep going. I'll be there, watching how far you get." Then he walked out, leaving Amelia with a pounding heart and an empty notebook. That night, Amelia sat by her window looking down at the city lights. In her notebook, she wrote a single line. "Dominic Cross, more mysterious than any file. I don't know if I'm exposing a criminal or uncovering a man." She closed the notebook, her mind in turmoil. Never had the line between justice and her own heart felt so fragile. A sudden downpour swept through the afternoon. Amelia hurried into a small cafe on a Brooklyn corner, its wooden awning creaking with age, the open sign hanging crooked in the wind. She brushed raindrops from her hair, ordered a cappuccino, and found a seat. The cafe was quiet, with only a handful of scattered customers. Soft yellow light fell across scratched wooden tables, the scent of roasted coffee mingling with cinnamon from a freshly baked pastry. Amelia pulled out her notebook, intending to make use of the moment to untangle the chaos of information crowding her mind. But when she looked up, she saw him. Dominic sat in the corner, wearing a simple white shirt, tie loosened, hands clasped on the table. No bodyguards, no entourage, just a man who looked tired, his gaze distant, as if searching for something. Amelia froze. Her heart raced. Half of her wanted to leave at once. The other half was caught by an invisible pull that rooted her in place. Just as she was about to turn away, Dominic looked up. Their eyes met. He looked briefly surprised, then his lips curved into a faint smile. He gestured lightly toward the empty chair across from him. "Quite a coincidence," Amelia said as she sat down, trying to keep her voice steady. "Maybe," Dominic replied, his tone deep but soft. The waiter set a cappuccino in front of Amelia, the foam drawn into the shape of a simple leaf. Dominic silently watched the steam curl upward from his own cup of black coffee. They sat listening to the rain drumming against the window pane. At last, Amelia spoke. "Do you come here often?" "Sometimes," Dominic answered, his eyes softening for a moment. "Here, no one asks how much the next deal is worth. They just let me be." Amelia tilted her head, studying him. For an instant, he wasn't the proud billionaire on the dance floor or the powerful figure splashed across magazine covers. He was just a man hiding from the noise of the world. "What are you hiding from?" she asked. Dominic's mouth curved into a faint sardonic smile. "From rooms that are too bright, from expectant eyes and empty words, from a family that measures my worth in numbers." He paused, his gray eyes suddenly shadowed. "I lost my mother when I was a boy." My father didn't cry. He just said, "Now you have to be stronger." From then on, love turned into pressure. Boarding school after boarding school. They taught me how to win, but no one ever taught me how to lose. Least of all, how to love. His words were quiet, but they struck Amelia straight to the heart. She tightened her grip on her cappuccino, warmth seeping into her palms. Dominic leaned back, exhaling. "I learned to build an empire, but not to live like an ordinary man. I can't even remember the last time I laughed freely, until that day at the shelter." Amelia stiffened. "You knew I was there." He nodded, a spark of mischief in his eyes. "I noticed you hiding behind the wall. You didn't take the picture. I guessed you saw something you didn't expect." Amelia said nothing. She didn't deny it. Dominic's gaze locked on hers, his voice dropping. "Amelia, do you know what it feels like to be seen only as a monster or a pile of money? No one looks at me as a person, but when you stood there, your eyes were different. You looked at me as if I was both wrong and right, suspicious yet worthy of understanding." Amelia's throat tightened. His words shook her deeply. All the files, all the cold numbers seemed to fade. Sitting across from her wasn't the notorious billionaire, but a man who had lost his mother too soon, who had walked the lonely corridors of boarding schools, who longed for a glance that was real. Dominic, she whispered, have you ever thought maybe people have been seeing you wrong? Maybe you're just the victim of rumors? He gave a sad smile, fingers tapping lightly against his cup. I'm not innocent, Amelia, but I'm not entirely sure what they say either. I live in the gray space people hate to admit exists. His answer made her chest ache. She wanted to believe in justice, yet she couldn't deny the feeling that she was seeing the real Dominic. No pretense, no armor, no flashbulbs. Outside, the rain eased. A faint jazz tune trickled from the cafe's old speaker. Neither of them spoke again, but the silence wasn't awkward. It was fragile, like a rare moment where two souls had been placed side by side without defenses. When they finally rose to leave, Dominic placed money on the table, then said quietly, "Thank you for listening." Amelia met his gaze, then nodded. "Thank you for talking." They stepped out into the street. The sky after rain was clear, pale sunlight breaking through the clouds, glinting off the puddles. Dominic buttoned his coat, his face calm again, but Amelia knew she had just glimpsed a part of him the outside world would never see. Back at her apartment, she opened her notebook. Instead of writing numbers or diagrams, she wrote only one line. Maybe I've been seeing him wrong all along. Amelia set down her pen and sat silently by the window. Outside, the city buzzed as always, but inside her, a quiet battle had begun. Justice or her heart, truth or trust, and she wasn't sure she was strong enough to choose. That night, a few windows at the newsroom still glowed with light. Amelia sat before her screen, the cursor blinking impatiently, but the words wouldn't come. She opened a file, closed it, reopened it, then sighed. Since the cafe meeting the other day, one thought had kept circling in her mind. What if Dominic was the victim of someone else's narrative? She had tracked his name for months, yet everything remained fragmented. Meanwhile, images of him among the children, laughing with mud on his shirt like a boy, or his low voice speaking about his childhood and his mother's death. Those moments replayed with painful clarity. They weren't evidence, but they weighed heavily than any numbers. Amelia shut down her computer and pulled on her coat. She needed air. The New York night was cool, the wind sweeping through silent blocks. At the corner, a street vendor poured hot cocoa into a paper cup. She cupped it for warmth, standing beneath an awning, watching light rain scatter across the asphalt like dust. A dark SUV pulled up at the curb. The door opened, and Dominic stepped out. He moved slowly, hands at his sides, deliberately showing he meant no pressure. The driver stayed inside, the cabin dark. "You skipped dinner again," he said, stopping a few paces away. "Are you following me?" Amelia asked, though her tone wasn't as sharp as she'd intended. "No." Dominic shook his head. "I drove by. Saw you leave the newsroom with nothing but that paper cup." He gestured toward the vendor. "I guessed right." Amelia sipped her cocoa, smiling faintly. "You guessed right." Dominic angled himself to block the wind from her. In the yellow streetlight, his face looked softer, more ordinary. "Are you all right?" She nodded, then shook her head. "I don't know. I'm used to doubting others. Lately, I'm doubting myself." "Because of me?" "Because of you." Amelia met his eyes. "I'm starting to believe you're not what they say. Or at least, not only that." Dominic was silent for a moment, lips tugging into a sad smile. "Thank you for saying it out loud." The wind picked up, cocoa and rain blending in the air. Amelia asked, "From the beginning, you knew I was a journalist, didn't you?" "I did," Dominic admitted without hesitation. "That night at the Gala. The way you observed people. I'd seen it in seasoned editors, and the way you sat alone, as if you wanted to vanish into the crowd. I knew right then. Yet you still came close," she murmured. "Because when you look at me," Dominic said slowly, "I'm not a monster." The words ached in her chest, not out of pity, but because they rang true. She knew the weight of being labeled, of being seen only through stories others had written. She told stories for a living, but sometimes those very stories blinded people to the truth of each other. "Dominic," she breathed, "I haven't found what I need. I can't conclude anything yet, but I want you to know my heart is moved." He studied her for a long time as if memorizing every word. I didn't come to ask you to stop, he said. Do your work. Just, if you see something good, don't ignore it. And if you find I'm guilty, write the truth. You're not afraid I'll hurt you? I am, he answered, so honestly it startled her. But I'm more afraid you'd have to hate yourself. Because of me. They stood there, listening to the rare passing cars. Everything felt slowed down, stripped of pretense. No promises, no grand declarations, just two people learning to trust their instincts. Walk a little? Dominic asked. To the river. It's only a few minutes. Amelia hesitated, then nodded. A few minutes. They walked along lit streets, past half-open windows. River wind lifted her hair. Dominic didn't touch her, only kept pace so she wouldn't rush. Do you ever dream of something ordinary? She asked. I mean, beyond numbers. Yes, he said, smiling this time freely. A kitchen that smells like waffles in the morning. Someone to argue with about whether to plant basil or mint on the balcony. A Sunday night with no emails. Amelia laughed. I'd choose mint. Then I'll learn to give in. They stopped at a railing overlooking dark, rippling water. Bridge lights shimmered gold across the river. Dominic stood beside her in silence. Amelia stayed quiet too. Some silences weren't heavy. They were soft, like a blanket in the night. Amelia, he said quietly. Yes? If one day you write a story about me, he hesitated. Write that I tried, even if it was too late. She turned, meeting his eyes. There was no arrogance there, only the weariness of a man who had gone too far and was searching for a way back. In that moment, she realized she was no longer standing on the outside. Dominic leaned closer, not rushing. May I? Amelia didn't answer with words. She gave a small nod. The kiss was slow and light, like placing a leaf on water. His warmth spread through her, cocoa lingering on her tongue, rain clinging to her hair. No applause, no fireworks. Just a real moment where two people admitted what they'd known all along. They drew apart after a few seconds. Amelia pressed a hand to her chest, as if to steady her heart. Dominic looked at her, eyes bright yet sad. I'm sorry if this makes things harder, he said first. Hard, Amelia agreed, then smiled, overwhelmed. But real. Dominic exhaled, relieved, as if receiving an answer he'd long awaited. Then go home safe tonight. Let me drive you part way? No, she shook her head. You've done enough. I'll walk. All right, he accepted easily. But promise me this. If you feel unsafe, call me. I won't ask why. Amelia nodded. All right. They walked back to the street. Before parting, Dominic brushed his fingertips lightly against hers, a touch so brief it could have gone unnoticed, yet warm enough to linger. Good night, Amelia. Good night, Dominic. He stood watching until she disappeared down the block before returning to his car. Amelia walked past glowing windows, her steps light for the first time in weeks. Back in her apartment, she sat at her desk and opened her notebook. She wrote, Tonight I kiss the man the whole city whispers about, and I know I love him. Beneath it, she added, I will still write, but I will write with every ounce of fairness I have. She set down her pen, resting her forehead against the cool window pane. The city roared outside, but inside her, a small courtyard had lit with golden light. Tomorrow would be complicated again. Tomorrow she might doubt herself all over. But tonight, everything was simple. She was in love, and it was real. Somewhere across the city, a car pulled away from the river. Inside, the man closed his eyes, touching his lips as if to keep the warmth alive. He didn't know what the future held, only that from this moment, he finally had something to fear. Not justice, not rumors, only the fear of disappointing her. And sometimes that fear was what began to change a man. The brown envelope lay under the door when Amelia came home, as if someone had slid it through and vanished. She picked it up, locked the door, and switched on the kitchen light. The smell of damp paper rose as she tore it open. Photocopied transfer records, black and white aid charts, a few shipping schedules, and handwritten notes filled with terse symbols. There was no explanation, just fragments. But when Amelia laid them beside her own notebook, her dates, license plates, photos of anonymous donations to the shelter, the timelines began to click together like gears. Money disappearing and reappearing under different names, coinciding with aid shipments arriving at the docks. A secret meeting on Dominic's calendar fell on the exact day a consulting contract with no content was signed. Each piece alone meant nothing, but together they formed a long, dark path. And right in the middle of it, Dominic Cross's name surfaced too often for her heart not to clench. There was no smoking gun to convict him instantly, but the broader picture told her something she didn't want to hear. He was guilty. Amelia sat frozen for a long time, as if all the sound had been cut from the room. At last, she photographed each page, encrypted a copy, and sent it to her backup account. She sealed the originals in a waterproof sleeve and locked them in the small safe in her closet. Then she slipped out to the balcony, hugging her knees under the cold night. Confront him or keep digging? If she kept digging, she'd need witnesses, original documents, at least one confirmed source. If she confronted him, she could hear his side of the story, or lose him forever in a single night. Her phone buzzed, an unnamed message. "Are you home yet?" Dominic. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "I'm fine." "Good night," she erased it. Typed, "I'm tired." Tomorrow erased again. In the end, she didn't reply. She turned the ringer off and pressed her hand against her heart. Day 1. Amelia arrived at the newsroom early. She printed several copies of the documents, sealed them in an envelope, and wrote on the front, "Open in case of emergency." She carried it to Ruth, the veteran editor who had guided her through her toughest stories. "What's this?" Ruth asked, catching the dark circles under Amelia's eyes. "I'm chasing something heavy," Amelia said quietly. "If you don't hear from me in 24 hours, open it. For now, please don't ask." Ruth studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine, but you be careful." Amelia nodded back. Leaving the office, she called an old source, a dock worker who had once helped her confirm ship schedules. "Last Thursday night, was there any odd aid shipment?" she asked. "One came in late, unloaded in a rush," the voice lowered. "All the papers were in order, but everyone knew it was too smooth." "I don't want to be involved, Amelia." "I understand. I won't use your name." She hung up and jotted another note. The rest of the day blurred into a series of hurried calls and quick meetings. A former accountant admitted to signing fake consulting contracts, but refused to hand over originals. A charity worker confirmed that the anonymous donor transferred money with clockwork precision each time an aid shipment arrived. Still just the outer rim of the circle, never the center. By evening, Amelia trudged out of the office, pausing in front of a flower shop window where lavender bouquets stood neatly tied. She thought of the river, of hot cocoa, of that slow kiss like a leaf touching water. She unlocked her phone. An empty chat box glowed back. "We need to talk," she typed, then deleted. "Are you free tonight?" Deleted again. She turned off the screen, shoved the phone in her pocket, and kept walking. Not yet. Not tonight. That night she couldn't sleep. She drafted an email. "Dominic, I will ask questions you won't want to hear. I ask them because I need to live with my work and my heart." She left it unsent. Before dawn, she set up a time location share for Ruth, scheduled to send in 30 minutes if her phone stayed unopened. Small precautions, but they cleared her head. Day 2. Amelia caught the early train to the shelter. The yard was quiet, with only a few children coloring under the awning. The director greeted her with a tired but kind smile. "No, Mr. D today," she said, "but this morning someone sent bread and milk." Same signature, DC. Amelia pressed her lips together. She sat on the floor, helping a little girl finish coloring a roof. "You can use any color," the girl said brightly. "Just don't go outside the lines." "Don't go outside the lines." The silly phrase stung her eyes with sudden tears. She smiled, nodding. By noon, Amelia was back in the city. At the same cafe as before, she ordered a cappuccino, the foam leaf slightly tilted. On the table, she rearranged her notes, drew another arrow. The picture grew clearer, but the missing piece in the middle remained. One only the man himself could reveal. She stared at her phone for a long time. Confront him. Not to beg, not to bargain, just to hear his truth, face to face, before she pushed on to the end. She typed, "This afternoon, 6 o'clock." Cafe under the bridge. We need to talk. Scene appeared within seconds. I'll be there. Amelia sent her location to Ruth. Meeting source. 6 o'clock to 6:45. If I don't check in by 7, call me immediately. Ruth replied with a thumbs-up emoji, solid as a locked bolt. All afternoon, Amelia was restless, staring at her reflection in the window. She tied her hair back and chose a warm coat. Before leaving, she slipped the brown envelope into her bag and double-checked the locks. The cafe under the bridge was quiet with warm lights. Amelia arrived 5 minutes early and took the corner seat by the window. Her hands clutched the cup to keep from shaking. At 1 minute to 6, Dominic walked in. Not hurried, not dragging. The stride of a man who knew he had to face something, and would. "Thank you for coming," Amelia said first. "Thank you for asking," Dominic replied, sitting across from her. His calm expression was familiar, but in his eyes she saw something thinner, fragile. She didn't stall. She slid the envelope across the table. "I received this, and I matched it to what I already have." Dominic opened it. He read every page, carefully. The silence stretched until Amelia could hear spoons clinking at the counter. When he finished, he set the papers down and looked at her. "You've spent the last 2 days on this," he said, not a question. "I wanted to stay silent," Amelia admitted. "I wanted to keep digging, find some other piece. But the deeper I dug, the clearer the same picture became. I didn't want to be led by an anonymous tip, so I waited. I checked. I went back to the shelter. I made calls. It's not enough to convict you, but it's enough to know you're guilty." The word guilty caught in her throat. She stared at her own fingers, white from gripping the cup too hard. Dominic exhaled softly. "I didn't think you'd piece it together." "I was too sure." "I was too sure too," Amelia swallowed. "Too sure I was seeing you wrong. I wanted to believe the good so much that I ignored the leftover pieces. But in the end, the pieces found each other anyway." A brief silence, then Amelia asked, slow and clear, "Dominic, I won't ask details. I'll only ask, were you wrong?" He didn't dodge. "I've done many wrong things in the past," Dominic said, voice sinking like stone. "But I never lied to you." "Is silence a lie?" Amelia pressed. "If it is," he nodded slightly, "then I lied that way. I kept you outside the dark. But when I was with you, I wasn't pretending." Amelia bit her lip. "I don't know what to do. I love you, but I'm a journalist. I can't throw a blanket over the truth just because of a heart." Dominic leaned forward slightly, then stopped, holding the space. "You owe me nothing. Whatever you choose, I won't blame you." "I'll stop the investigation," she whispered. "But maybe I can't sit here with you anymore." Dominic nodded instantly. "I understand." Amelia stood. She wanted to hug him tightly, but her arms wouldn't lift. She only said, "Thank you for coming. And for not lying to me." She turned away. At the door, she paused for half a second, but didn't look back. The bell chimed softly as she stepped out. Dominic remained still. He stared at the empty chair, the envelope on the table like a wound. For the first time in years, fear flooded him, not of prosecutors or courtrooms. He feared losing the gaze that had seen the human part of him, the gaze that had pulled him out of the dark, even as it illuminated every stain on his hands. Outside, the wind off the river carried a biting chill. Dominic pulled up his collar and walked into the night. His confidence, once seamless, had cracked. At the one place he thought strongest, his heart, he knew he had reached a turning point, and here he would have to choose. Still following the story? If this video found you outside Soul Stories, we invite you home, where every touching tale begins. Don't forget to subscribe and stay with us. In the top office of Cross Holdings, the night pressed heavily. The city below blazed like a sea of lights, but inside the air was dense, lit only by the cold glow of a desk lamp shining over thick files. Dominic sat behind the desk in silence, a cigarette between his fingers that he never lit. The door opened quietly. Marcus, his closest aide, stepped in. He didn't waste words. He placed a file on the desk. "We have a problem," Marcus said evenly, though tension edged his voice. "She knows too much. Reed, the reporter. If we let this go on, she'll ruin everything." Dominic remained still, eyes fixed on the river of headlights beyond the glass. Go on. You've let her get too close. I don't understand why. However, the only solution now is removal. An accident, a trap, or at the very least a serious threat to scare her off. If not, we lose it all. Removal, Dominic repeated, each syllable heavy. Marcus held his gaze. You know the rules. Anyone who steps too far where they don't belong doesn't walk back out. Dominic closed his eyes. Behind his lids, he saw Amelia, her steady bright eyes, her trembling hands as she laid the envelope before him, her voice breaking as she confessed, I love you. He opened his eyes and spoke, low but firm. No one touches Amelia. Marcus froze. What did you say? Dominic rose, tall and commanding. I said no one. If anyone disobeys, they're no longer mine. But that means, Marcus's grip tightened on the file, you'll be signing your own end. Dominic turned away, voice cold. Maybe, but I don't want to play this game anymore. In the following days, Dominic lived in two worlds. By day, he still held meetings, signed papers, and wore the familiar cold smile. By night, in his empty penthouse, he sat alone with an untouched glass of whiskey and a letter he never sent. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw Amelia, her gaze both accusing and pained, but with trust still lingering. Keep his power and lose her. Let it all go and risk everything, but at least have the chance to return to her openly, honestly. The scale seemed obvious, yet admitting it meant tearing apart the man he had built for years. That pain was sharper than any trial. On the third morning, he arrived before the company lawyers. He unlocked the safe, pulling out files he had hidden, lists of shell companies, secret accounts, confidential memos. He laid them on the desk and stared at them for a long time. Finally, he picked up a secure phone line, the one reserved for federal prosecutors. This is Dominic Cross, he said steadily. I want to confess, and I want to cooperate. Before stepping onto that irreversible path, Dominic had one thing left to do. He called Amelia. Meet me. Same place, by the river. Amelia arrived in a long coat, her hair tied hastily, worry shadowing her bright eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind from the water lifted her hair. You called me out here to say goodbye, didn't you? She asked, her voice hoarse. Dominic stepped closer, his hands clenching and releasing. I've made my choice. I can't keep up this road, I'll confess. Cooperate with the authorities. I don't want you living in fear or tearing yourself apart anymore. Amelia's breath caught. You're sure? Sure, Dominic nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. I've done many wrongs, but you made me want to change. If I could one day stand beside you, I want it to be as a man in the open. No masks, no shadows. Tears welled in her eyes. She couldn't find words, only stepped forward and threw her arms around him. Dominic held her tightly, whispering into her ear. I don't ask for forgiveness now. I only ask that you wait if you can. Amelia sobbed softly, nodding against him. I'll wait. As long as it takes. Just come back as yourself. Dominic closed his eyes, holding her as if he could carve her warmth into his bones to carry into the days ahead. Then he pulled back, stepping away. His eyes were sorrowful yet clear, as if for the first time he truly saw the road before him. Stay safe, Amelia. Be strong, Dominic. They looked at each other one last time. When Dominic turned away, his shadow stretched across the concrete, each step heavy but resolute. Amelia stood behind, tears streaming, yet inside her burned an unfamiliar faith. The road ahead would be painful, but for the first time, Dominic was no longer just a man of the dark, and she, with all her love and belief in justice, would wait for the day he returned. The news broke on a Monday morning. Billionaire Dominic Cross confesses and cooperates with authorities. The headline blared across every newspaper front page, every TV broadcast. The world reeled. Some called it the great downfall. Others sneered it was just a performance to save himself. But to Amelia, the news cut like a blade. She knew he had chosen this path, yet seeing his name beside the word confession still made her heart seize. On the day of the trial, the federal courthouse was packed wall to wall with reporters, cameras flashing relentlessly. The atmosphere was chaotic, like the entire city had gathered to watch a fallen titan step into the light. Amelia arrived early and was seated in the press gallery. Her familiar notebook lay in her hands, the pen trembling slightly. Yet she didn't write a word. Her eyes stayed locked on the door where Dominic would appear. When he did, a wave of whispers swept the courtroom. Dominic wore a dark suit, no tie. His wrists were cuffed, yet his posture remained straight, his steps slow but steady. Gone was the arrogance of Gala nights. Gone the half-smile that once drove people mad. His face was calm, his eyes deep but weary, like a man who had accepted the cost. Amelia's chest ached. She had braced herself, had prepared for this. But nothing could soften the sight of him now. The man who once walked her along the riverbank, who once held her in the scent of rain, now standing at the defendant's table. The proceedings began. The prosecutor read a long list of misdeeds, shady transfers, shell corporations, paper-thin contracts. Each charge landed like a hammer blow against Amelia's heart. Dominic stood motionless. He didn't protest, didn't deny. Only when questioned did he respond, his voice steady. Yes, I did. The gallery buzzed. Some who once praised him now sneered. Some who once took his funding turned their faces away. But there were other looks too. Curiosity, even surprise, when the prosecutor mentioned special cooperation. The defense rose, presenting evidence of Dominic's voluntary disclosures, the documents he had provided, and the networks he had exposed. The trial shifted, from convict to critical witness. Amelia sat still, torn between pain and relief. He wasn't running, wasn't blaming, wasn't hiding behind power. He had truly chosen the light. During recess, as Dominic was escorted down the hallway, Amelia rose to her feet. Though blocked by guards and barriers, their eyes met. Dominic paused for a heartbeat. Amid the shouts, the clicking cameras, his gaze held only hers. A small nod. No smile, no words, just a nod, as if to say, I kept my word. I did what I had to do. Amelia bit her lip, holding back tears. She gave a tiny nod in return. I see it. I believe you. In that moment, with cameras flashing wildly, only they understood. It was a silent vow, a fragile thread binding two souls in the chaos. By the end of the day, the judge pronounced the sentence. Dominic would serve time for the crimes he admitted, but with a significant reduction for his cooperation. The judge emphasized, it is rare for a man of the shadows to walk willingly into the light. The gavel struck. The room seemed to seal shut. Amelia closed her eyes as tears slipped down her face. On the defendant's stand, Dominic lifted his head, not in defiance but with the quiet steadiness of a man who finally knew where he was going. That night, Amelia returned to her apartment, opened her laptop, and started a new article. Her first line read, Dominic Cross, from darkness to light, from power to truth. She didn't whitewash him, nor did she condemn him further. She wrote what she saw, a man who had done wrong, a man who admitted it, a man who chose love and truth over power. When she typed the final sentence, she leaned back in her chair. Outside, the city still blazed, but inside everything was still. Not peaceful, but clear. She whispered into the night, I saw you, Dominic, and I will wait. The federal prison sat on the city's outskirts, far from the bright streets. Towering concrete walls rose high, coiled barbed wire crowning their tops. Inside, Dominic Cross, the man who once made financial markets tremble, was reduced to a gray prison uniform, a solitary cell, and a rough wooden table with a dull pencil. He sat before a blank page. For days he had meant to write, but every time the pencil touched paper, the words slipped away. Tonight, after hours of silence, broken only by the distant echo of guards' boots, Dominic began. Amelia, I'm not sure if this letter will ever reach you, but if you're reading it, then some part of me is still being heard. I once thought I was untouchable. I thought power was the armor that would always keep me standing. But now, stripped of everything, the offices lit through the night, the penthouses, the hands shaking mine for profit, I see how empty it all was. Only one thing was ever real, your eyes. I regret, Amelia, Not the money, not the reputation. I regret making you cry in that courtroom. I regret not stopping sooner, so I could have stood before you as a decent man. I wish I could start over. Not the empire. Myself. I want to know what an ordinary life feels like. Sharing morning coffee, arguing over little things, sitting together in silence without calculation. I want a good life, Amelia. And I want that life with you. If you cannot forgive me, I'll understand. But if even a piece of your trust remains, I ask you to wait. One day I'll walk out of this place, not as the dominant cross of the shadows, but as a man worthy of holding your hand in the light. I love you. Dominic. The letter arrived at the newsroom, buried in the daily stack of reader mail. Ruth found the envelope, its handwriting unusual, and placed it on Amelia's desk. Might be someone you know, she said. Amelia opened it, reading slowly, line by line. The letters trembled, uneven, but every word carried weight. With each sentence, her tears fell harder. When she reached, only one thing was ever real. Your eyes, she folded the letter, pressed it to her chest and sobbed. No, that love wasn't dead. It couldn't be. It lived, growing stronger with every tear and every shaky line he had written. Amelia sat for a long time by the window, city lights glinting in her tousled hair. In her hands, the letter felt fragile as a breath, yet powerful enough to steady her heart. She whispered, as if Dominic could hear her through miles of concrete. I'll wait, as long as it takes. Just come back to me. The prison gates clanged shut behind him, steel echoing in the wind. Dominic stepped out, sunlight striking his eyes after months of gray walls. He squinted, inhaling deeply, his chest swelling with free air. There was no motorcade, no cheering crowd. Only an old car waiting by the curb, and a familiar face behind the wheel. Welcome back, said Alex, once a business partner, now long out of finance. His voice was warm without judgment. Dominic smiled faintly. Back, but not the man I was. Alex nodded. That's the good part. The first days of freedom were harder than Dominic imagined. No power to command, no assistants scheduling every hour, no mansion on the hill. He rented a small apartment on the city's edge, cooked his own simple meals, did his laundry, and learned again how to live as an ordinary man. Things he once thought were luxuries for others. Sometimes he felt lost. Those who had once called him friend were now silent or turned away. A few phone calls he made were met with cold replies. Sorry, we can't stay in touch. Yet there were other moments. A few true friends remained. Alex introduced him to several nonprofits. At first, no one trusted a man fresh from federal court to handle anything. But Dominic didn't mind. He started small, raising funds to repair the shelter's roof, calling for donations for a community classroom, and delivering food boxes to impoverished neighborhoods. He no longer wore tailored suits, just plain shirts, worn shoes, hands dirtied from lifting crates. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of usefulness. Some nights he came home exhausted, muscles aching from a full day of labor. He poured a glass of water, sat at the table, and stared at the receipts, which showed that only a few $100s had been raised. A drop in the ocean compared to the billions he once moved. But for a child with new books, a family with dinner, it was everything. And Dominic knew. This time, he wanted nothing in return. Yet when night fell and silence pressed in, fear crept back. Sitting by the window watching the city lights, he asked himself, was Amelia still waiting? He remembered the letters he had written from prison. He remembered her whispered promise. I'll wait. As long as it takes, but time could change many things. She was now a journalist, her career rising higher. She deserved a man untarnished by a past like his. More than once he held his phone, thumb hovering over her number. But he couldn't press call. He was afraid. Afraid her voice had changed. Afraid she had moved on to a chapter without him. Alex noticed his silence. You're still thinking about her? Dominic only nodded. You may have lost everything, Alex said, but don't lose faith in yourself. If she loves you, she'll see you for who you are now, not who you were. Dominic said nothing, but the words stayed with him all night. One afternoon, Dominic returned to the old shelter. The children cheered, running to him. A boy clung to his arm, eyes shining. "You're back. We missed you." Dominic lifted him up, laughing, his heart light. The sheltered director came out, her gaze kind. "You've changed. You're not the arrogant boss you once were." Dominic smiled faintly. "Maybe for the first time, I'm truly living." Watching the children play, Dominic felt a spark of hope. Maybe when Amelia saw him like this, she'd believe he had truly changed. But would he get the chance to show her? That night he wrote another letter, though he didn't send it. "Amelia, I am no longer the powerful billionaire. I am only a man learning to live again, learning to be decent in the smallest of things. Each day is hard, but I keep walking, because one day I want to stand before you without lowering my head. I'm not sure if you're still waiting, but if you are, then with even one meeting, I will say thank you, because it was your love and faith that carried me here." Dominic, he folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and sat back in silence. Outside, the city still roared, but inside he knew he was walking a different road now, a road not paved with gold, but with trust and redemption. And with every step forward, one fear lingered. Was Amelia still waiting? Late in the afternoon, Amelia sat in the familiar little cafe with Alex. Golden light spilled through the window, glinting across the wooden table. Alex set his cup down, studying her for a long moment before he spoke. "He's out. Last month." Amelia's heart tightened. Her hand trembled as her finger traced the rim of the porcelain cup. How is he living?" Alex sighed, though his eyes carried a quiet warmth. "He's no longer a billionaire. He's rebuilding from nothing. A small fund, a few charity projects. It's hard, but he's doing it, genuinely, without show. Amelia," he paused, his voice lowering, "he still says your name." Amelia lowered her face, her lips quivering. All the months of holding on to her promise, "I will wait," rushed back, heavy and sweet. She lifted her gaze, her eyes shimmering. "Can you help me arrange a meeting with him?" On another afternoon, Amelia returned to the riverside, the place where they had last parted. The wind carried the scent of salt and cold from the water, tugging gently at her hair. The place was unchanged, the old railing, the dim streetlights casting yellow halos. She stood there, heart pounding, eyes fixed on the path. Every minute stretched like a year, her hands clenched together, fear gnawing at her. What if he doesn't come? What if he's changed? Footsteps echoed. Amelia turned. Dominic was coming. He looked thinner, his hair a little longer, dressed simply in a plain coat, but his eyes, the eyes that had once hurt her and made her believe at the same time, were still there, deep and real. Amelia didn't wait another second. She ran to him and wrapped her arms around him tightly. Tears burst free, soaking into his shoulder. "Dominic," he faltered for half a beat, then pulled her into his arms, holding her as though letting go would make her disappear. "I'm sorry," Dominic whispered, voice breaking. "I made you wait too long." She shook her head through her tears. "I promised I would." Slowly, Dominic sank to his knees, his hands trembling but his eyes steady. "I've lost everything. Money, power, reputation. But I found myself because of you. Amelia, can you forgive me?" Amelia bent down, wrapping her arms around him, tears streaming, but her lips curved into a smile. "I've been waiting for this day for so long, and now you've come back." He lowered his head against her shoulder, breathing out as if releasing a lifetime of weight. The riverside was hushed, the world retreating, leaving only the two of them, holding each other as though nothing else mattered. In that moment, love and justice finally met at the same point. No more battles, no more torment, only two hearts that had endured enough trials, now finding each other again, whole and worthy. 5 years had passed since that afternoon by the river. The city was still loud, still dazzling with lights, but for Amelia, everything had changed. Each day she wrote fair and fearless articles, becoming one of the newsroom's most trusted voices. And Dominic, the man who had once shaken the entire financial world, was now the founder of the city's largest charitable foundation, dedicated to education for underprivileged children and reintegration programs for those who had lost their way. His name was no longer tied to scandals and courtrooms. People now called him by a new name, the Redeemed Man. On the night of the 10th annual charity gala, Amelia stood in the front row, her figure framed by a simple ivory gown. All eyes turned toward the stage as the host announced, "Please welcome the founder of the foundation, Mr. Dominic Cross." Dominic walked out, golden light catching the silver strands in his hair, his tuxedo perfectly tailored. But gone was the cold arrogance of years past. In its place was calm dignity and warmth in his gaze. His speech was brief and unembellished. He thanked those who had supported the cause, spoke of the children who had found homes, and shared his conviction that everyone deserves a second chance. The applause swelled and lingered. Amelia clapped too, her eyes following his every movement, pride blooming quietly in her chest. The music began. Dominic stepped down from the stage, his gaze sweeping the crowd until it found Amelia. He walked straight to her, extended his hand, and bowed slightly, his eyes shining under the crystal lights. "Care for a dance?" His voice was deep, familiar. He paused for a heartbeat, then added softly, clearly, "This time, it's forever." Amelia laughed through tears shimmering at the corners of her eyes. She placed her hand in his. "Forever," she whispered back. They moved to the dance floor. Violins swelled, lights dimmed to a gentle glow. Dominic held her, not too tight, not too loose, just enough for the two of them to move as one. The world blurred around them, leaving only two hearts beating in rhythm. Amelia looked up, meeting his eyes that had once caused her pain, had once made her believe, and now overflowed only with love. Dominic bent down and kissed her, slow and sure. Applause thundered through the hall, but to them, the crowd no longer existed. There was only this moment, the moment of return, of forgiveness, of a love that had withstood the storm. As the music faded, Dominic leaned close, whispering in her ear, "I found my true self because of you, and from now on, every dance belongs to you." Amelia held him tighter, whispering back, "I've waited for this day, and I know we'll never lose each other again." In the shimmering lantern light, amidst the music and applause, they held hands and walked off the dance floor, as if entering a new chapter of life, a chapter of justice, happiness, and eternal love.